Hello, everyone. Thank you, Pamela, for the introduction. So firstly, I want to say on behalf of BlackRock how excited we are to be sponsoring this event. Now for the 8th year. Every year the events get better and better. Thank you, Amafore, for organizing all of this and getting all of us together. Hopefully this is a statement of our dedication, our commitment to the local pension fund system. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm very honored to be hosting this fireside chat with my colleague, Jessica Tan. Jessica is the Global Head of Transition and Sustainability Solutions for Clients. And in the next 35 minutes, we want to have a discussion around transition investing. But most importantly, we also want to speak about the critical role that institutional capital has in this transition to happen, which will require the rewiring of economies and which will represent the largest reallocation of capital that we have seen in history. At BlackRock, we have defined 5 mega forces. By mega forces, we refer to forces that are reshaping and are generating structural changes that will change economies, that will change businesses, and most importantly, will change portfolios. Those mega forces are digital disruption, like artificial intelligence, the rewiring of globalization driven by geopolitics, aging populations, the future of finance, and the transition to a low-carbon economy. The most capital-intensive of these mega forces is the transition to a low-carbon economy. It requires a massive relocation of resources as supply chains, production processes, and energy systems are rewired. And it's a growing focus globally, but also for BlackRock because of economic realities, but also because of client demand. And to put that demand in context, we've seen $2.3 trillion in assets deployed annually in transition over the last decade, and we don't expect that to slow down. But what is different today to what was different 4-5 years ago? We have identified a major shift in how investors, how consumers, how companies, and asset managers are viewing the transition. Conversations with clients, with many of you here 4 years ago, were much less formed. They were very aspirational, but they lacked orientation and direction, and that's not happening anymore. Today, investors are turning towards infrastructure, towards private equity to fund that transition. And they are asking questions like, how do you measure the progress of the transition in my portfolio? How do I understand the trajectory of my portfolio, and how do I apply any necessary tilts? Consumer preferences have also shifted and are much more concerned about the products they're buying and the retailers that they're supporting. When we speak to executives of companies all over the world, they're asking questions. How do I collaborate with other parts of the value chain, especially when trapped by energy systems? How do I build multi-billion-dollar plants? How to make ships dual versus single use? And then finally, asset managers like ourselves, we're building platforms that provide choice to investors to be able to capture that exposure to the transition. So with that as an introduction, let's get directly into the conversation with Jessica. And Jessica, let me start with the first question. And testing if you walk the talk, we mentioned how consumer preferences are driving a big part of that transition. Would you mind sharing with the audience, you personally, what types of new technologies, sustainable technologies you have adapted that you didn't use 5 years ago?
Hola, buenos días. Estoy muy feliz de estar aquí hoy. Thank you, ROQUE. I'm so happy to be here today. It's been about 5 years since I've been able to come to Mexico between COVID and some other things, and I'm just so delighted to be here. and really delighted to see our continued partnership and growth and commitment of both our office here and the continued investments that we make in Mexico, and also partnerships with our clients with, first and foremost, the Afores. So thank you. Wonderful question. Versus 5 years ago, I would say I've personally made a lot of changes adopting new sustainable technology as it's become more convenient and also cheaper. So I think one of the most tangible, and we're seeing this global trend, is my family, we've got an electric vehicle. So we used to have, a combustion engine car, and we switched to an electric vehicle. And versus 5 years ago, where adoption globally was very low, it was maybe about 3%. Today, as a percentage of new car sales, it's actually about 18%. And we've done some research that shows by 2030, it should globally be about 40%, which is really remarkable if you think about it. And I think that's driven by a number of things, a lot of the forces that you touched upon. One, I think the technology is getting cheaper. It's getting better. I mean, I have to admit, when my family looked at this a few years ago, we were worried about the range of the batteries. You don't want to run out of charge, and then if there aren't that many charging stations, right, all of a sudden you get stuck, and that doesn't sound very convenient. So as all of this ecosystem, comes together, we think that a lot of consumers, as you correctly say, ROQUE, will be adopting more and more technologies. And of course, also with cars, with the price of gas in the last couple of years, it has really tilted some people to make a different economic decision. The other big thing is we're renovating our home right now, and this home hasn't been renovated since about the late 90s, so it's been a while. And I'm at this decision point where I have to buy new technology for the house to outfit it. So we made the choice to switch from what's currently installed, would be a gas stove, into an induction stove or an electric stove, which is, by the way, also safer for my children, I guess. But in any case, we're excited to make that change. And then also a heat pump, so just a more efficient way of heating and cooling the home. And all of these things, interestingly, with the US IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, they flow through some subsidies, to certain purchasers of these technologies. And I do think that will help to change consumer behavior in the years that come. And I mean, okay, I could go on and on. There are so many technologies that I'm excited about. You'll know we have a fund, Decarbonization Partners. It's a growth equity strategy. We're invested in several companies there, but one of them, called MycoWorks, makes mushroom leather, like leather out of mushrooms. And it's this very luxurious feeling leather, and the company is working with GM now to talk about potentially having mushroom leather seats in cars. So you think about that, you have an electric vehicle, you want to know that the different parts are also sustainable. So I'm excited to see that potentially come online. This country, MycoWorks, I know Mexico City is a very fashionable city. They also have a partnership with Hermes to work on, a bag that is coming online as well. So just so much to look forward to.
Funny now that you mentioned EVs. I have a 9-year-old at home. I have 3 kids, but I have a 9-year-old at home. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to come to my daddy's, have you seen this Ferrari, this Porsche? Like, my kid now comes to me, is like, have you seen this Tesla Model S plate that accelerates 2.5 seconds, 0 to 60, right? So the new generations are thinking differently about the transition. And Jessica, another big driver of transition, of course, is the investors and clients that we see all over the globe. You spend a lot of time on the road speaking to some of the largest and most sophisticated investors. What are some of the themes that you have seen around that you can share with the audience around themes and client interest in transition?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, ROQUE. I mean, as an investment manager, and you hit the nail on the head, right? It's our job to study these big mega forces, these trends, whether it's inflation, high rates, I mean, certainly, relevant here in Mexico. But this transition to a low carbon economy is really something that is going to be pervasive, both in terms of risks and opportunities, and it's going to affect portfolios across the board. So first of all, I'll say the capital intensity that you mentioned earlier, ROQUE, is really, really pervasive. And we see businesses transforming their business strategies to be better prepared for the transition to a low carbon economy. We see different industrial policies across geographies, right? So different ways of incentivizing dollars to go into this overall trend. And governments are coming up with ways that, really affect national competitiveness, right? So whether it is to get energy resilience, to decarbonize, or just to attract dollars from a large capital perspective, all of these things are coming into play. And when you're putting all of these things together, you can see why clients are really curious about how these are going to affect portfolios. And you mentioned the survey that we ran earlier. 56% of our clients globally, institutional clients that we surveyed for this, said that they were planning on increasing their allocation to the transition over the next 1 to 3 years. Now that contrasts with 9% who want to decrease. So because our clients are so focused on this, this is certainly an area that we're studying. Now, you and I have been talking to clients about sustainability and the transition for quite some time now. And I will say focus has kind of shifted over the last 3 years in a few different ways that I'll highlight. One, I would say when this conversation, really picked up steam in 2020, 2021, a lot of our clients were focused on sort of broader-based sustainability, and many still are. They absolutely are. But I think as we've seen industrial policy shift dollars into the low-carbon transition, that has categorically been a focus for our clients, an outsized focus, I should say. The other area that's interesting is a lot of our clients before, in the earlier days, were much more focused on strategies or technologies that were green today. So solar, wind, they wanted to make sure that the carbon intensity or carbon emissions of their portfolios look good, especially ones who are very front-footed in reporting on sustainability. That's still the case. We have tons of clients who are very interested in those investments. They're, from a return profile perspective and also from an emissions perspective. But we have a growing appreciation from our clients to be much more inclusive across energy systems. Right, so it's important to be focused on things that are green today. It is also important to be focused on companies and industries that are greening or along the journey. That could include, oil and gas companies who are developing technologies to decarbonize. It can include transition energy such as natural gas. We invest across all of that alongside renewables, and I think our clients have been able to understand that nuance and want to know how to invest across the energy system with equal intensity, especially as these industrial policies, whether it's the IRA in the US, Repower EU, Japan is coming out with a policy. Clients want to understand how that's going to affect their investment choices. The other thing that I'll mention is that clients really want to understand how to look at carbon emissions and intensities across their entire portfolios, right? So we get a lot of questions. This is what I'm invested in today. What does that look like from an emissions perspective? I've made these commitments externally. I want to meet them, but before I meet them, I have to understand where I am today. So we spend an awful amount of time, a lot of time with our clients, just helping them gauge where they are today, where they want to go, and trying to figure out custom solutions about how they can get from point A to point B.
Great. Jessica, let's switch gears into research. How is your team monitoring and tracking the low carbon transition to evaluate some of the investment opportunities that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we're really lucky at BlackRock to be able to partner with the BlackRock Investment Research Institute. So the BlackRock Investment Institute, BII, puts out a lot of macro research, and they've been focusing a lot of time on the transition to a low-carbon economy. And the team has developed a transition scenario. And it leverages the expertise of, we have 600 people across BlackRock today who are transition experts. They spend more than 50% of their time. They're climate scientists, they're investors, financial modelers, so on and so forth on these themes. And so we have this pot of folks who coordinated with about 80 investors across the firm to come up with this transition scenario, which is our view of how the transition will play out. It's not what dollars we think we need to meet net zero. It's what we actually think is unfolding today. And I'll focus on a few things. It's kind of the size and how it's unequal in terms of how it's playing out in different sectors and regions. First, in terms of just the overall size. So you mentioned in the beginning that today we see about $2.3 trillion US dollars of money going into investments across the energy system. That is a lot of money. And we project that by 2050, that will increase to about $4 trillion, so almost double. But it's not just the magnitude of change of these capital-intensive projects, it's the composition. So today, across the energy system, the world invests in about 50-50, high-carbon solutions to low-carbon solutions. But as certain low-carbon solutions get cheaper and more efficient, that mix is going to change. So by 2050, that mix is going to be something more like 80-20, low carbon solutions and high carbon solutions. And again, it's not just the mix, it's also the texture of how those dollars are deployed. So there's going to be a fundamental shift from business models that are very OpEx intensive today to ones that are more CapEx intensive as these new technologies and this new infrastructure gets built out. All of those things have huge investment implications to our clients' portfolios, and we spend so much time studying them. More so, it's going to be a different sort of transition, different pace of transition across different sectors and across different regions. And they differ because we see three reinforcing factors that are driving this huge amount of money being moved. It's consumer preferences, technology, and government policy. And you can see how they all relate, right? So technology over the last couple of years, even you were mentioning the last 5 years, has really, really improved. You know, the cost of batteries over the last 10 years has fallen 79%. So you think about what that does for consumer preferences, and then you think about government policy on top of that. And when you look at government policy, you look at it from usually two different perspectives, right? Demand side and supply side. And so there are all of these industrial policies that are standing up companies on the supply side to help even some of the installed base of incumbents come up with technologies that really help decarbonize. And on the supply side, you have a whole bunch of, you know, whether it's subsidies or tax credits that are helping to drive consumer adoption of these more energy efficient technologies. And it's all a virtuous cycle. As companies funnel this into the companies from an overall supply side, they can put more money into developing technology faster. As the technology gets better and cheaper, consumers want to adopt it more. However, there are varying speeds across sectors and regions, right? Across sectors, we see power decarbonizing pretty quickly. We see, we're talking about EVs earlier, so kind of this like lightweight vehicles decarbonizing quickly. And across developing markets, we see that trend, you know, picking up a little bit, or developed markets, we see that picking up a little bit more quickly. Now, there are certain industries where that's a little bit harder. Aviation, shipping, heavy industrials, you think about cement and steel. Today, where the technology is, it's still very expensive or very difficult to do relative to the installed base. And so we see that moving along a little bit more slowly. In emerging markets also, it moves a little bit more slowly for a number of reasons. One, the cost of capital is just a lot higher. And two, if you look at the population growth just through the global south, it's just moving much faster than in other parts of the world. And so with that growth of energy, you just see the decarbonization path looking a little bit more different. However, even with different paces across sectors and regions, none of this is a foregone conclusion. There could be breakthrough technologies, there could be changes in industrial policy that can really help accelerate that flywheel, those consumer preferences, technological innovation and adoption, and also government policy that will really help that flywheel and help these industries or regions reach what we're calling tipping points. So that point where a technology in a particular sector or region becomes cheaper to adopt. So if cleaner is cheaper, we assume that consumers are rational and will adopt that. If it's more convenient to adopt and cheaper, we assume that consumer preferences will help those areas grow. And we've been spending a lot of time kind of focused on what that means for our clients and investment opportunities.
On the survey, institutional survey that you carried, Jessica, you know, one of the myths is that, you know, Europe is, you know, it's actually a little bit far ahead from the US in that adoption. But the output of that survey highlighted something very interesting, which the intention for transition in their portfolios was actually higher in the US than in Europe. Can you come?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we polled 200 institutional investors, right, I think globally about 56% wanted to allocate more to transition investing over the next 1 to 3 year period. The number was actually higher in the Americas. It was 65%, arguably from, you know, a lower base. And Europe has been leading a lot of the conversation, just with a lot of regulation driving financial capital moving there. And we think that regulation has been really important in moving dollars to that area. However, the conversation has also changed globally, right? I would say 2 years ago it was very focused on, you know, what are the risks? That's still very important. Now more and more clients are talking to us about what is the opportunity. And that really has been driven by just the, it's almost an arms race in industrial policy, right? So with the Inflation Reduction Act having something close to $500 billion of money being funneled into a lot of clean energy solutions, both on the supply and demand side, Repower EU, and a lot of the Asian countries kind of matching suit. Clients want to understand what are the opportunities to invest globally or in some cases regionally at that point to adopt. So I would say that the European regulators are very much trying to have their installed base and their long-term asset owners deploy money into that space. That hasn't changed. However, even among a mixed political environment in other areas across the world, I think when you talk to CIOs, when you talk to people who are responsible for investment solutions, it's really hard to ignore the transition to a low carbon economy just by the vast amount of opportunities because of the high carbon intensity, or the capital intensity of the dollars being deployed into that trend. We see that being a global phenomenon.
And talking about opportunities, Jessica, you touched on a few of them already, but what investment opportunities are you excited about?
Yeah, there's so many. And first of all, when we talk about investment opportunities, you always have to take into account what's priced in, right? So anytime anybody tells you a theme, that's a great theme, but you really have to work to figure out where are the markets currently pricing it, where could there be dislocations, where do we think things are going in the short, medium, and long term. But and we talk to clients about this all the time. So maybe to take a step back, ROQUE, as you'll know, we have a few different platforms at BlackRock. So one, we have about $700 billion in our sustainable investing platform. And just for some context, at the end of 2019, that number was $106 billion. So just to think the overall growth over that short period of time from 2019 to now, 106 billion to 700 billion, I think talks about the interest in this overall theme from a lot of our clients, because we really focus on client choice. If our clients are interested in this, we want to study it, we want to show what the risks and the opportunities are. Now, we talked about around sustainability, clients really being interested in the theme of a low carbon transition. And right now, our transition investing platform has over $100 billion in solutions across index, liquid active, and private market solutions. And the private market solutions, maybe I'll just take some time to talk about that. We have about 130 investments globally. And these are investments all across the energy system, all across different decarbonization solutions, including 3 in Mexico. So we have investments in wind farms, in solar, that we're really excited about. More globally, we're invested in the world's largest battery, or what will be the world's largest battery in Australia. We have investments in hydrogen. We partner with incumbents in oil and gas as they work on their decarbonizing strategies. And we're really proud to be able to bring those investment opportunities to our clients. Now, where I'm really interested in going forward and where I think there's a lot of investment opportunities, I'll touch on a few. Infrastructure, which I'll come back to, and I use that word really, really broadly to what that encompass. Critical minerals, emerging markets, and also resilience. And I'll touch a little bit on all of those themes. So infrastructure, I think it's hard to ignore, right? Just scaling renewables, whether it's wind or solar, it's already cheaper in a lot of markets. Continuing interest there for sure. Strengthening grid reliability. I think this is going to be a huge theme across the globe as a lot of industries electrify. Certainly developing new technologies and then figuring out how to get those out into the system. And what I mean by that is not only generation facilities, energy transmission, and all of these things as we build up plants and factories are extremely capital intensive. And when we think about this, sure, there's been a lot of money going into infrastructure. I'm sure that's a large investment theme for many of you out there. But I still think that there's a gap in the amount of money that we see in terms of investment opportunities being available in years to come versus where clients are deployed today. And so that's probably one of the themes where we spend a lot of time speaking to clients about, just because of the broad range of opportunities there. Now, when we talk about grid reliability, when we talk about batteries, it's hard not to talk about critical minerals, right? When you talk about batteries, we talk about lithium ion. Lithium is something that, takes a really long time to discover and make a lithium mine, usable. And it takes, and there's a lot of debate on how carbon intensive that might be, even though that's a critical component in electrifying the long-term sectors. We believe that there's a huge investment opportunity there, but also an opportunity to recycle. lithium. In one of our investment portfolios, we've also recently invested in a lithium-ion recycling business. When you talk about grid stability, it's hard not to talk about copper, and same thing. So we think that there's going to be a lot of focus on critical minerals in the years to come as well. Switching over to emerging markets, I would say this is probably a #1 theme that we hear from clients globally. So a lot of our clients want to deploy money to the global south, want to deploy money to where it might take a little bit longer to decarbonize, especially as the energy use of growing populations is absolutely going to explode in the years to come. And right now, there aren't as many vehicles to do that. I know a lot of companies, including BlackRock, are working on solutions. A lot of it requires partnership with governments to make sure that there are the right incentives in place to be able to incentivize private sector capital alongside private sector capital to some of these investment opportunities. At BlackRock a few years ago, we started a fund called Climate Finance Partnership alongside the French, German, and Japanese governments, where there's a catalytic capital piece. It's about $670 million deployed to emerging markets, and we're really proud that we've deployed money in wind farms in Kenya, some solar companies in Southeast Asia, and we're also looking at a lot of investment opportunities in Latin America. So there's a lot of interest to deploy money in this area, and interesting things to come for sure. The next thing that I'll talk about is resilience, and what I mean by resilience is physical resilience. So think about the damage that comes from climate damage. And in the same research piece that we referenced before, ROQUE, we project that by 2050, if we continue along the same path and don't address a lot of these physical climate damage, GDP on a global basis will be 5% less than it would be otherwise. And if you think about all of these extreme weather events, whether it's extreme heat, flooding, hurricanes, so on and so forth, you can actually see the damage and understand the economic impact. And without proper investment dollars and capital being driven into that space, there are just real GDP impacts to growth globally. The space now, right, we have a lot of clients wanting to deploy dollars into it, and there aren't that many investment vehicles. And so that's one area that we're working with clients on to potentially innovate on new solutions, very much like we did partnering with clients to innovate on emerging markets with the Climate Finance Partnership.
Fantastic, Jessica. All great insights. We promised to keep back 5 minutes as we ran over on the previous session, so we're going to cut it a little bit shorter. If there's one message that we want to leave with the group, let me read the following. So, pension capital in its scale and stability can and should be harnessed to support the energy transition. As we transition to a low-carbon economy, the demand for clean energy, sustainable technologies, and environmentally responsible practice is surging. This presents a massive investment opportunity. Sustainable energy and infrastructure projects require substantial capital, and pension funds can be the catalysts that drive this transformation, acting as the vehicles of change. So with that, thank you very much for the time. We will stick around and happy to continue the conversation between sessions, and thank you, Dama, for the invitation. And of course, thank you, Jessica, for all your great insights.
Thank you so much.